Well, hello, you gorgeous mother truckers, you, and welcome to another video. Right then, so Reeves cannot blame Trump for British growth downgrade, warns IMF. Let's go through this. It says it's a 6-minute read. We'll go through it as it comes up. So there she is, hair by Lego. So Britain's growth prospects have been cut by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, as it warned Rachel hair by Lego Reeves that she could not blame Donald Trump's trade war for the downturn. Well, we all knew this, and as I've mentioned before, it was always going to be used as an excuse. The IMF said that UK policies were stoking price pressures and would push Britain's inflation rate to the highest in the G7. It means that inflation in the UK will outstrip the US rate, even as the president continues his tariffs onslaught. Pierre-Olivier Gounaratchis, the IMF's chief economist, said domestic factors were the main driver behind Britain's downgrade, signaling that the Chancellor's 40 billion tax rate had damaged growth. Shock horror, we all knew that the second it was announced, but of course, it's the old, everything's fine here, you're all talking out your arse. The UK is now expected to grow by 1.1% this year and 1.4% in 2026, down from the projections of 1.6 and 1.5 just 3 months ago. What a surprise. In a further blow to Labour's ambition to boost living standards, which it has no intention to do in whatsoever, the IMF has said that the GDP per head, better proxy than overall growth, would almost stagnate this year and barely rise in 2026. And that's because of the mass unemployment that's going to come because of the national insurance employer raise and the minimum wage. Mr. Gounaratchis said the tariffs are playing a role as they are in most countries, and it's weighing down the growth in the UK. But there are some UK-specific factors, and I would say in terms of downgrade of 2025, domestic factors, probably the biggest one. Okay. He also said weaker growth for the second half of last year was still weighing on the economy, noting that long-time borrowing costs had also climbed. Gilt yields rose in the wake of Ms. Reeves' maiden budget after the Chancellor announced a debt-fueled spending increase of £70 billion a year. Well, it's not, is it? Because out of that £70 billion, nearly all of it has gone overseas and has absolutely nothing to do with the United Kingdom. Oops, excuse me. The fund also downgraded its global growth projections over the next 2 years, warning that trade war could wipe as much as £1 trillion or £750 billion off the world economy. The IMF said the higher prices owing to steep increases in energy, water and council tax bills would weigh on consumer spending. Can you just imagine that? That everything everybody else said, and anyone with a brain, in fact my youngest daughter, even she understands the principle. While the fund said the impact of recent tariff announcements would weigh on the growth, it added that increase in gilt, weaker private consumption amid higher inflation as a result of regulated prices and energy costs for this decision to cut the UK growth forecast. Not good, is it? Forecast will deal a blow to hair by Lego's attempts to balance the books. She's no intention of balancing the books. She could have balanced the books if we didn't send nearly all of it abroad. You know, if we actually spent money in this country instead of sending it abroad, and then paying for people who float over here on a dinghy. Lower growth and higher borrowing costs have already eroded into wafer-thin headroom she has to meet her borrowing rules, with even a small deterioration now enough to wipe out her £9.9 billion buffer, which of course would be massively bigger if we didn't send a shitload of money just to the Ukraine, for instance. The Chancellor is in Washington this week, where she's vowed to defend British interests. No one's interested in Britain anymore. In meetings, perhaps the most important meeting will be Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, as she seeks to make progress on a trade deal. Responding to IMF forecast, Ms. Reeves noted the UK will still expect to grow faster than France or Germany this year. Well, that's fine. It doesn't matter how shit we are, as long as we're not as shit as somebody else. That's a bit like football teams banking on the 3 teams below them being crap enough so they don't get relegated. Utter rubbish. She added, the report also clearly shows that the world has changed, which is why I will be in Washington this week defending British interests and making the case for free and fair trade. In an analysis that will alarm the Bank of England, the IMF has also suggested that surging prices in recent years had eroded public trust in its ability to tame inflation. Correct. Households now believe that UK's ability to meet its inflation target 5 years ahead is closer to an emerging market like Brazil or India rather than developed economies like the US or Germany. It expects UK inflation to average 3.1% this year, the highest in the G7, but of course, remember, there's always somebody worse than us, but we're okay. And above the US at 3%. Despite global warnings that higher tariffs will send US prices soaring, UK inflation is expected to ease back to 2.2% in 2026, below America's rate of 2.5%. Happy days. The IMF said the UK and US both stand out in both the direction and magnitude of their revisions on inflation. It blamed the rise of one-off regulated price changes, such as utility bills. One-off? You mean every 3 months now it is? However, the IMF believes the tariffs on UK goods will hurt growth more than the rise in prices as countries divert cheap products into Britain. Really? Mr. Gutierrez said the effect of tariffs on countries like the UK is lowering price pressures, not increasing them. That's nice. In brighter news for households, the IMF expect the Bank of England to cut interest rate 3 more times this year to 3.75% as price pressures ease. Water bills rose as much as 47% this month, with households in England as much as £225 a year worse off after the increase. Ours has gone up, my personal one has gone up higher than that. I think we're paying nearly £240 more this year for the same water through the same pipes. But also more because I live in a slightly bigger house than the ones over the road. It's just, you can't make it up. Energy price cap also rose by 6% to £1,849 a year for a typical household in April. Council tax bills also jumped in April for millions of households. These factors, as well as the increase in the minimum wage and the employer national insurance contributions, are expected to push inflation to above 3% in April from 2.6% in March. I and many others have also predicted it's going to make a massive increase in the unemployment, but that's beside the point. Fund is also cut its forecast for the US and global growth, warning that the sweeping Liberation Day tariffs introduced by Mr. Trump would inflict lasting damage on the economy. Tariffs have a large impact on global activity. That was the whole point of them. The IMF said in its latest global outlook, it's predicted to have a negative hit to activity ranges between 0.4 and 1% of the world's GDP by 2027, or more than $1 trillion in cash terms. Wow. The global economy is now expected to grow by 2.8% this year and 3% in 2026, down from January's projection of 3.3% for both years. The US is expected to expand by 1.8% in 2025. While this is faster than other advanced nations, it's down from its previous projection of 2.7%. Gutierrez warned that growth could take another hit if trade tensions escalate further. Risk remains firmly tilted to the downside, he said. The IMF warned that the major climb down on tariffs from the US would do little to rescue global growth. Yeah, so it makes no difference, does it, either way? Mr. Gutierrez said the fund had been forced to tear up its forecasts in the wake of Mr. Trump's April 2nd global tariff announcement. Again, that was the whole point of them. Amazing how everybody goes on about his tariffs, but failed to mention the tariffs everybody's been slamming on America for years and years. But let's not worry about that. While its baseline projections are based on tariffs of up to 50% on key trading partners of the US being restored, the IMF has warned that making a 90-day tariff reprieve for countries such as Vietnam and Israel permanent will make little difference to its projections that tariffs on trade between the US and China remain above 100%. So basically what they're saying is it doesn't matter if he pauses, it's not going to make any difference. except for the fact it's doing exactly what he expected it to do. It said the gains on the lower effective tariff rates for those countries who were previously subjected to higher tariffs would now be offset by poorer growth outcomes in China and the United States due to the escalating tariff rates. The losses in China and the United States will become larger in 2026 and beyond, while gains in other regions would fade, resulting in global growth of 2.8% in 2025 and 2.9% in 2026. Fascinating. So basically, there is no way that Hair by Lego can blame Trump at all. But we all knew that in any case, didn't we? Shock horror, colour us all surprised. Any case, 2 videos coming up at the end of this video. One will be the last one I uploaded, the other one will be the one that the gods of YouTube and their mighty algorithm will have selected just for you. It's called The Chosen One. If you like what I'm doing, you agree with what I'm saying, you just hit that subscribe button. Don't forget, you can like, you can share. You can even attempt to pass a comment in the comment section. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Anything that gets deleted, nothing to do with me. Unless, of course, you've been an arsehole. And then it will be. But I will read it out and tell you before I shut it down. Any case, enough of that. I am done. So, till the next one.
It's an arrow at the bottom.